All right, all right. Welcome in, boys. Good to have the whole group here for our wide receiver show. Now, if you like what we do here on the official, like and subscribe to this video, comment, give us your thoughts on what we're talking about here. Do you agree with the star index? Have you seen wide receiver and the running back and the quarterback videos? Because this week we're going into wide receivers. And I'm going to throw it to Matt, as I always do, to kind of introduce some of the features of the model, although it's pretty similar inputs as the other positions, right, Matt? With the exception of obviously no QB arm velocity. But what goes into wide receiver and any differences we should know about before we dig in?
Yeah, so like every other position, it's the speed score, burst score, agility score, power score, then their height, weight, and hand size, arm length, and their count of other sports they participated in the past. And all that gets blended up and weighed together. And how it's weighed out for wide receivers is there's two big ones, and it really likes speed and it likes multi-sport athletes. As we're going to talk about here more, wide receiver athleticism, it doesn't tell you as much as it does for the other positions. I just think that just goes to show you how hard a wide receiver is to evaluate in general. It's a field position, it's a technique position, and athleticism will only take you so far. And I think especially the athleticism traits that we don't have good measurements for, like short burst or short distance agility and like flexibility, are two big things that we don't really have standardized measurements for. That I think are a big part of the position, and that's definitely a lacking area of the data that we have.
Right. This kind of confirms what we feel like we've known and we've talked about for a while. But maybe not in the same way that you might think, is that, sometimes what we say is athleticism doesn't matter for wide receivers. David, would you go that far to say it doesn't matter, or maybe it matters in a different way or less, or in a way we can't quite measure? How would you do it after running these numbers and seeing some of the output that's come out? How would you say athleticism blank for wide receivers?
It's tricky. I mean, athleticism matters in athletics. Athleticism matters. It's just maybe not as much as the other positions. I think we kind of discussed, like, I don't know, being above it. Harvard being above like 50 percentile is like, I don't know, a decent sort of benchmark, I guess, but that's not like real statistics. I understand that. So that's sort of a useless thing to say, I suppose. But like, the guys below 50th, I think the bigger names were like Chad Johnson and Wes Welker. Aside, there wasn't much else beyond that. So I think, yeah, I mean, being athletic definitely helps. It's just, yeah, like the R squared's low. It's tough to say. It's not like the freakier you are, the better you are, anything like that. It's definitely very skill based and like echo everything that Matt said, basically. So it's just tough. I'll be honest. Don't listen to me when it comes to wide receivers. My brain's in a pretzel. Not that I'm like, I don't think I'm terrible at it, but it's just very hard to, it's just very hard to pinpoint, I feel like.
Yeah, I think, it must matter in a different way than we have come out to just yet, because it certainly matters. But, one thing you said, I think you mentioned that more is not always better when it comes to athleticism. I think that does show up. And I'll just pull up our, what we've done with other positions is show kind of the landscape of the NFL with our metrics. So the wide receiver star index, these are the top 15 or so wide receivers by star index in the NFL. You can see that contrasting quarterbacks and running backs, where like the top five all felt very, top five, top 10 was like the superstars at the position. Here, we're missing some of the superstars. I mean, we're missing Justin Jefferson. We're missing Jamar Chase. We are missing Tyreek Hill even on this list. And so the highest elite number does not always mean the elite player, whereas with the other positions, it actually did seem to be the top five were the top five in the NFL. So, there may be a threshold. You have to get to a certain point to be viable. But as we've talked about before with wide receivers, a lot of times I think you meet an initial threshold. And after that, there's things that we are having trouble measuring, such as nuance, feel, like Matt said, a feel for the position. But for those of you listening on the podcast, you should watch this on YouTube because you'll see this beautiful graphic we put up. But the number one star index receiver score in the NFL is Odell Beckham. And tied with him are two more, Alec Pierce and rookie Rome Odunze. So you've got Odell Beckham, who was elite for years. He's had injuries and some other stuff going on. But, I think there's no one that's going to argue he was one of the premier elite players at the position. Alec Pierce, wide receiver 3, 4, buried on the Colts depth chart. I don't think we're going to see a whole lot from him. He is an incredible athlete, but not a great wide receiver. Rome Odunze remains to be seen. High draft pick. We'll see. He's looked pretty good in preseason. And then you've got Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously should be a stud. DK Metcalf, physical specimen, but I think up to this point we can agree, he's not been a stud wide receiver 1. He is a wide receiver 2 for fantasy. He's not commanding the targets you need. You got first round pick Xavier Legette. I'm not sure what to think about him. He was like a 5th-year breakout or whatever in college. Xavier Worthy, another rookie. First round pick. We're excited about him. But even you'll find people who have detractions from him. Oh, he's kind of a one-trick pony. He's only a deep threat, whatever. Receivers are so interesting because the style of play matters. Whereas when we look at these, big, fast running backs, you're good if you're big and fast, period. And quarterbacks, big, fast, has a hose, as David likes to say, you're going to probably be good. They come in all shapes and sizes. Role matters. I just think it's a lot harder. I'll throw out other names here for those listening. Malik Neighbors, wide receiver. So we've got 3 first-round picks here coming into the rookie season. You have a couple guys who haven't done hardly anything and honestly don't project to do much. Alec Pierce, Jonathan Mingo's in this group, Terrace Marshall, Brendan Rice, who's a rookie, so we don't know, but he's a 7th-round pick. Usually that means you're not going to have a future NFL potential. So it's an interesting group, I think. One that we can't make a whole lot about, although it's good to be athletic. I don't think it's a guarantee on the high end the way it is with some other positions. So I'll remove the NFL group. I think another thing that we like to do here is look at the college landscape. I'll throw it to the group here. Matt, you first. What do you make of this list? Interesting. Vanderbilt wide receiver transferred to Georgia. Number 1, London Humphreys, 99.5 star index. When you saw this, spit out the top 15 in college football, are you like, oh, it's full of studs? Are you surprised? How do you take this?
I wouldn't really say full of studs. It's just, the most athletic guys. I think it does a pretty good job of capturing that. It probably does weigh multi-sport a little bit too much. A guy like Caleb Bedford has solid testing and he's big, but he's a 5-sport athlete. So he gets like a big bump because, there's hardly any 5-sport athletes even in the database. It just doesn't happen very often. So we don't have very many examples of busts as well as hits. So, it's just really heavily weighing those hits at the moment. So that could come down a bit more in the future, of course. I think it does a solid job for what it is. Like we said at the beginning, athleticism is only going to take you so far at wide receiver.
Yeah, that's interesting about Medford. He actually came up because people were playing him in DFS this past week for New Mexico, and he caught 2 passes or something like that. Yeah. I didn't realize he had a great star index ranking. I probably would have been more excited to play him. But as we know, that just doesn't really equate. Some guys of note here, Evan Stewart should be a first-round pick going into the NFL with a 98.5. Hakeem Williams on the other end, a guy who is now buried on the depth chart. And we thought that. We said, oh, he's big, fast, and athletic, but none of us liked him as a wide receiver, as a recruit. David, any other guys here that jump out to you, either positive or negative? I see Cordell Russell. We probably all have some feelings about him.
Yeah, he was another raw guy coming out, and that's kind of what I've learned the most is to not just like bet on raw guys and bet on raw freaks and just hope for the best. That Hakeem falls into that category. London Humphrey is mostly like a vertical cut type guy, also raw, but obviously really good measurable stuff like that. I think McEwen's pretty interesting. Had a good freshman season at UTSA. You know, obviously G5 guys, you can't get too excited most likely, but kind of a similar profile to like a lot of people are talking about Jalen Royals from Utah State as like a even like I think a Senior Bowl dude was like he's a potential day 2 guy, kind of similar profile there as a guy that could put himself into an NFL discussion. Hopefully keeps ascending, but UTSA does a pretty good job finding those athletic guys. But I think he's a pretty solid receiver regardless. But yeah, I don't know. At least they captured Stewart and like Alec Minor, who's both those guys are kind of like on the top 10 preseason NFL lists at least. So I don't know, found that at least.
Yeah, I think some of these guys were surprising. Like Ayo Minor was not on my list of guys I would think were supremely athletic. Interesting, a few guys here, like you said. Humphreys was a good freshman receiver. Now he's in a big on the big stage. Maybe he can prove something. Darrell Grill Jr., interesting, avoided year 1-0 at Syracuse on kickoff returns. He had 12 for like 250 yards, which I think is pretty good. Savion Williams is a guy people are talking about at TCU. He may be their wide receiver 1. I didn't realize these guys had such high star index, but it doesn't mean that they're guaranteed a whole lot. Then you have Cordell Russell, Malachi Coleman, Julian Fleming. Russell and Fleming are basically done. I mean, I think Russell's done. Like 0-1-0, buried on the depth chart at Colorado. Just seems unlikely. Jair Shorter, big and fast, but he's bounced around. North Texas. He may have gone somewhere else. I think now he's at Memphis. Like he's not a guy that's like commanding a wide receiver room. So it's tough. I think there's a lot of landmines here. I don't think this doesn't give me the feels where I'm going to base decisions off the wide receiver star index the way that I feel like I will more with quarterbacks and running backs. They got to show it in a different way for wide receiver, either on tape or in production, early production. I'm still a big believer in breakout age, a big believer in avoiding the year 1-0. So to me, production is mattering a whole lot more with wide receiver than the athleticism score is kind of how I'm looking at it right now. But it's tricky. Like we said, we still all throw up our hands with wide receiver a little bit, and we're trying to figure it out. But, man, it is a tough – the skeleton key for wide receivers continues to be elusive, I think, for us. That'll do it for this edition of The Official. Stick with us. We're going to go through some recruiting classes and see who's coming on the horizon with Star Index, because I still think it's valuable to see the high-end guys as who has potential to be that NFL pick. But we are pairing it, I think, more with tape and some other things with wide receivers. Stick with us on The Official.